Well, first of all, if we're going to take his method of using numbers, then I've got hundreds and thousands of cases that I worked on, because those cases were not jury trials. They were cases that were prosecuted under various county attorneys' offices and the AG's office. If that's the numbers we want to use, then my gap with experience compared to Mr. Kline is even more immense. And again,
Sidney Gleason was convicted in a jury trial.
What I would say is, go talk to your neighbor that lives down the street who's a police officer, or your friend or your family, and ask them, or ask the people who work in the court system whether things are better off, and they will emphatically tell you no. My conviction rate as a DA is 80%, so it exceeds what his office has put out in the last 18 months. And again, it's about Mr. Kline has a great career as a politician. I'm a prosecutor, and what do you want?
Now, many of our people in our audience will actually be going to the phone in just a second to call their police officers and those court employees. Let me ask you, Mr. Kline, you've had a rap, rightly or wrongly, as being a one-trick pony. It comes up. All you're interested in is the issue of abortion. Can you give me 3 examples of areas where you have been passionate in prosecuting areas of crime, even more so than your predecessor, Paul Morrison?
Absolutely. As Attorney General, I brought together the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the United States Department of Justice, local law enforcement, the Western District of Missouri U.S. Attorney, the Kansas U.S. Attorney, and we formed one of the first cyber crimes task forces in the nation. It is up there in Parkville, Missouri. We put over 100 internet predators of children in prison while I was Attorney General.
That was one.
Meth labs. We aggressively pursued meth labs. They dropped 70% while I had the honor of being Attorney General. Another issue that I...
But how about as District Attorney?
As a District Attorney, one of the things that we have done is I've established, and there weren't these Special Assistant U.S. Attorneys when I assumed office, and I can name cases that the office insisted they prosecute rather than handing off to the feds, and the man or the criminals walked out with probation and committed other crimes. We don't do that anymore. I've got Assistant U.S. Attorneys in the office, so as we're dealing with gun crimes, as we're dealing with some child porn crimes, as we're dealing with white-collar crimes, we will take them into federal court to put people in prison rather than them have probation at the state level.
Mr. Howe?
Well, first of all, the coordination and cooperation between other law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices while I was in the office was far better than what it is right now. To say that we didn't have an assignment to the U.S. Attorney's Office as Special Assistant, that was done when I was in the office. We had endless, especially when I was in the drug unit, cooperations with federal law enforcement for wiretaps and other investigations that I was involved in. And really, one of the chief complaints of law enforcement officers right now is the lack of cooperation between the DA's office.
What would you be doing, though, if you were elected over the next 4 years that is different than Mr. Kline has done in his tenure as the district attorney?
What I would do is, first of all, we got to target the career criminals. The 5 or 10% of cases that come in here are career criminals who are in and out of the prison system. We need to go aggressively against them to put charges together and ask for tougher sentences. That's an area of emphasis that I think has fallen by the wayside. Secondly, I think we need to target or put less emphasis on juvenile first-time offenders. I've heard from people out in the community that, you know, somebody who breaks a mailbox, is there a way to have non-court intervention so we can take some of the court resources that we use there and use non-court related sanctions and then use those resources to target the career criminals who are the biggest threats to our community? The last thing that I would do is, because this staff is so young right now, is start training them. There is not a set training program in place, and I'm a big believer as a leader that we need to establish a training program so people have the tools to succeed. That's one of the chief complaints of law enforcement is prosecutors aren't ready to go when they go to court. That's what's needed.
We have the highest conviction rate in the office in over 5 years. The office is performing well. You're getting just noise rather than specifics. And I agree with a couple of points. Strengthening penalties, I was there, authored Jessica's Law, and it passed. I was there, authored the first human trafficking law in Kansas history to put these folks behind bars, and it passed. And I appreciate Mr. Howe's support for that. It's a little bit late. We could have used it earlier, but he wasn't engaged in that fashion. The office is doing great. Look at the stats, and I encourage you, talk to law enforcement, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that you say in one of your press releases, Mr. Howe, on your website is this. You pledge, if elected, to be a full-time, quote, district attorney working a minimum 40-hour week, and you pledge not to accept out-of-town speaking engagements during the work week unless, quote, directly related to law enforcement obligations. Are you insinuating that Mr. Kline hasn't done that?
That is absolutely true. He has gone on speaking engagements that are on a personal nature and not directly related to the prosecution of cases. And I haven't heard him deny that yet. The other thing is I promise that I will continue to live in this community. And so that's another promise that I've made to the people of Johnson County, and work full-time. Unfortunately, you know, you can laugh about it, Mr. Kline, but you know what? The people expect that. Taxpayers pay their hard-earned money that we do our job. And that's the expectation that they should have, and that's my promise.
And your response to that, Mr. Kline?
You know, I went to Flint Elementary School, Hawker Grove Junior High, Shawnee Mission Northwest, and I've lived in this community my entire life since I was 5, except for 4 years while I had the honor of serving as Attorney General. As soon as Mr. Howe dismissed his frivolous lawsuit, I bought a house here in Shawnee where I grew up.
It's a contract
I'd
for
also
deed.
say that, thanks, Steve. I would also say that I've had the honor of testifying before the United States Senate as it relates to predatory collection practices of nonprofit hospitals, because I'm recognized as a national expert when I won the case against Missouri and established the foundation for the medically indigent here in Kansas. I testified, or I've spoken in Louisville, Kentucky on human trafficking because I wrote the law, one of the first laws in the nation that protects people from human trafficking. So that experience has led others to seek my opinion, and I'm very honored to provide it because it's important that people be safe.
And that's why you're saying you were making public speaking engagements outside of the state of Kansas?
Well, yes, I get invitations all the time. I don't do it all the time. Most of them are on weekends, and I work way more than 40 hours a week. You know, I've been very engaged in that office, and look at the results. Edwin Hall is gone. John Henry Horton is gone. The killer of Terry Zinner is gone. All of those cases, Matthew Cullen, 25 years, and compare it with Mr. Howe. And the major case that he had, the most significant case in which his mistake would have allowed the killer to walk free if we had not caught it when I came into office. So compare the facts, not just the noise.
Mr. Howe?
Well, Mr. Kline likes to trump up this Nugene Wilson is a major problem or error on my part. I'll tell you the real facts. The real facts are I tried the case. It hung on an 11-1 mistrial because of a hung jury. Everyone recognized that the jury was going to convict him of second-degree murder and ag arson. I sat down with the defense attorney soon thereafter. We worked out a plea arrangement. Before Mr. Kline took office, myself and many other prosecutors asked him on numerous occasions, would you please sit down with us and go over pending cases so things don't drop through? He refused to do so. The day he took office, he fired me and 7 other prosecutors who had hundreds of cases and knew nothing what was going on with the office. In the chaos that resulted, Mr. Kline was not aware of all these facts. And the bottom line is, Mr. Wilson pled exactly to the plea that I had worked out prior to Mr. Kline taking office. So what that symbolizes is that Mr. Kline put politics over public safety, because if he had taken public safety as job one, he would not have conducted his transition in a way that could have jeopardized cases.
It's fascinating, and people make mistakes. It's a problem when they don't own up to it. Steve, after that hung jury, set the jury trial with the judge, and you can go to that. Here's the document that shows it on the Johnson County website. He agreed to a trial on day 98. The problem with that, as Steve knows, is on day 90, the defendant is released for speedy trial. Judge Bornholtz has stated that in the Kansas City Star. He would have walked free. Steve never spoke with me. I wasn't even the DA. When this mistake occurred, it was a month before I was even elected district attorney, 1 week even before the AG's election. And so his boss was Paul Morrison. The judge is who he needed to get to fix his own problem. He can't produce any writing where he emailed me to tell me he had made a mistake. He never contacted me to tell me he made a mistake. We got into office, and I let Steve go. I knew about these cases. We'd audited them. And you will see on this document, we went in on January 17th, got the jury trial moved up 1 week, which put it within speedy trial. I filed several motions in this case to try to put it in a posture, and only then, when we took speedy trial off the table, did the defendant agree to plea.
Okay, let me just move on to some territory here, because we're not going to get any, there's a he said, she said on this.
No, go to the website and look at the documents.